Hello, my creative friends, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Prompt, which is the currently not quite daily prompt. The 2 to 3 time a week prompt doesn't have the same ring. Anyway, this is another Mindset Monday episode, and what I wanted to do in this episode, this was brought up by one of the participants of Fast Screenplay who threw out this idea for something for me to talk about in one of these videos, and that really... I've sort of mulled it over in my brain, and I thought what I really want to do is talk about the screenwriter's mindset and really how to maximize your brain and your thinking to make creativity flow more naturally and fluidly, to help you find and generate original material, to help you actually persist and go all the way through the process. Ultimately, one of the big things that I have discovered along the way of going down this rabbit hole of reverse engineering the process and really discovering the mechanics of how to make all this work, how to help writers get to not just the screenplay, but the viable, producible screenplay the producers need them to have, is ultimately it comes back down to the screenwriter's brain and the mindset that comes forth from that brain. Now, there is... If we look at the world of neuroscience, now I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm at best, I have a pop-sci interest in this kind of a thing, but one of the things I am fascinated by, because of the fact that I teach writing, that I really have focused for so many years on helping writers generate creative material and get creative about themselves, one of the things that I have focused on is how the brain works and what happens within the brain to actually make creativity possible, to help you get to the creative stories. How do we actually create something that's original? How do you actually effectively use the tool inside your skull, your brain? How do we actually use that to find your voice, to turn that into something that can actually engage us and take us on a journey? And one of the things that I have found along the way is there's they used to think this was literally true. Today it's partially true, but it's an imperfect analogy of the right brain, left brain idea. That the right brain is the creative, free-flowing, analytical, non-analytical side of your brain. The left brain is your scientific, analysis-based part of your brain. Something that I heard recently on some podcast I was listening to is a better way to think of it is that the right brain is the big picture brain and the left brain is the detail brain. So you really do need both sides of it, because if you get too fixated on the detail, you're going to miss the big picture of it, the intuitive, free-flowing aspect of it. If you only focus on the intuitive, free-flowing stuff, then the details are going to be what trips you up and make something not really stick, right? So one of the things that neuroscience has discovered about the brain is this idea of plasticity. Now, the idea of plasticity sounds like when we say the brain is plastic, we don't mean plastic like a plastic cup. We mean plastic like pliable. The plasticity of the human brain basically means that the things that you do are you're going to get better at doing those things because the neurons that fire in your brain, think of your brain as this giant mass of electrochemical impulses going. And when you try to do an action, let's say pick up a cup, right? When you're a little baby, I've got a little infant child right now, 8-month-old, and when he goes to try to grab something, sometimes his hand will miss the thing, right? Because his brain hasn't quite got the motor skills yet to actually grasp that thing and pick that thing up. But as we start to do this, as he does it more and more often, the connections in his brain, the neurons that fire to make that happen, the motor cortex part of his brain, the visual object, the spatial orientation, the movement of his hand, the different parts of the brain that fire to make that happen. The very first time he goes to do something like that, they don't know how to make that work. And so the hand's going to miss the cup, right? But as he continues to do it, and then he starts to get some feedback when he does it effectively, or when he actually touches the cup, or when he actually grasps the cup, or when he actually is able to then lift the cup, or then he lifts the cup and the liquid goes that way. And eventually, the sequence of connections, the neurons required to make that activity happen, they make the right connections, and the brain starts to remember which connections are good. And so as you continue to practice something, those neural pathways continue to form. And as they continue to form, as they continue to do a job successfully, they start to create what's called a myelin sheath, this sort of tube that goes around the neural pathway that enables the neurons to go faster, so that you're able to do things. When you get really good at a skill, you do that skill repetitively, you do it over and over, you improve at that skill, you strengthen those pathways. Eventually, your neurons are able to do that with lightning speed, with rapid succession, right? So you don't have to think about it anymore. You can simply just do that thing. And this is why practice makes perfect. Because as you continue to practice something, the neural connections in your brain really solidify, and actually your brain is designed to make those tasks easier and more intuitive and more natural and more unconscious. You don't have to think about them at a certain point. Now, I'm talking about a baby reaching for a cup, but the same thing happens with your writing. The same thing happens with your creativity. If you're sitting down to write a screenplay for the very first time, as you sit down and you just sort of blast something out because you've seen a bunch of movies before, seeing a bunch of movies and being able to create a movie, totally different things. If you've seen 1,000 films, you have neural connections for analysis. You have neural connections for seeing patterns in stories. It makes you think you can create stories. But the reality is creating the stories requires a whole bunch of different skill sets that you haven't yet developed. So don't be upset, don't be afraid, don't feel bad when you sit down to try to create them and it doesn't quite look right. This sucks. I thought I could make what's this? What you have to do is you have to continue to take action every day. You have to continue to build those pathways. You have to continue to, as you practice, to be looking for the ways that it lands effectively or it doesn't land effectively. Because that's what's like grabbing that cup. That's what's going to help you form the pathways that make it happen. So when I sat down to try to figure out how to guide writers through the process, one of the challenges that I had was that everyone out there teaches screenwriting the same way. They teach story structure. They teach as if the 3-act structure, beginning, middle, and end, setup, conflict, resolution, turning point on plot point 1 on page 30 and plot 2 on 90, and the 7 steps or the 18 steps or this graph that goes like this or this line. Storytelling is not an art. No, scratch that. Storytelling is not a science. Storytelling is an art. There are scientific dynamics to it. There are things that we can look at and say there is setup and payoff. I have a whole series on the dynamic of setup and payoff and how that really is the underpinning of all storytelling. You set something up. What's the audience expectations? You play with that expectation, then you pay it off. Or as you pay it off, you set something else up. Those kinds of dynamics are something that we can study and analyze and see the underlying structure of something. But where does it come from? Where does the originality come from? Where does the uniqueness come from? It comes from your brain. It comes from your life experience. It comes from your interpretation of the world and applying that to this story framework. Now, just because you've watched movies doesn't mean you can do that. What you have to actually do is develop those neural pathways in your brain. So you have to really learn how to most effectively use the right brain and the left brain together synergistically. So what I've found is that when people focus on just teaching screenwriting through structure-based approach, what you're really trying to do is a left brain driven approach to storytelling, and it strips away so much of what the right brain needs to include, that intuitive sense of it, that feeling of what works, that feeling of how to explore and play with the rules and bend the rules sometimes. You're not going to know when to bend the rules if you're not tapped into that bigger, that intuitive, that right brain way of looking at storytelling and looking at story creation. And where does that come from? That comes from your life experience. That comes from your journey itself. So when I built Fast Screenplay, it wasn't about guiding you through some mechanical process. It might feel like it because you're going one step at a time, but each of those steps is designed to do two things. First, we start with the article or the exercise of the step itself so that you can understand, so you can intellectually understand something. You can see the big picture of it. It can just infiltrate your brain. It goes into your creative subconscious. Now, that's not enough, though, to actually build those neural pathways. What we have to do is we have to physicalize it. And that's why there's an exercise for every single step of the system. There's something physically to do. There's a physical exercise. By physicalizing it, you take the concept and you make it tangible. By making it tangible, once you make it tangible, you invoke those different areas of your brain that are going to be used in the creative process. So now as you go through this process, what we're doing in Fast Screenplays, we're building on each of the previous steps. So as you intellectually understand something and then you physicalize it, you do it, you create an epiphany for yourself. There is a creative subconscious implant is not really the right way to think of it. Your creative subconscious absorbs it in an experiential way. We learn by doing. We learn by experience, right? I can teach you stuff all day long. I can give you 5 tips to the best dialogue you'll ever write in your life. At the end of the day, they're going to go, oh, intellectual, bing, dopamine. 1.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. That's awesome. I'm so much better now. When I go to write my next line of dialogue, I'm going to be a champion at it. And then you will forget about those 5 points because you haven't implemented, you haven't physicalized. And that's why that's why part of my big frustration with writers and the approach to writing in general is this sense of we can do it through some formulaic approach. Now, we have to do it through shaping the brain and shaping the mindset that we bring to the creative process. If your brain has plasticity, by the way, isn't just the neurons. What neuroplasticity means is that your neural connections will literally change. The connections that they've made will break apart and form new connections to service the new things that you're doing. So let's say you've developed a habit of, I don't know, playing the piano or something along the way. And as you develop this, your neural connections get really good at it and get solidified and you're just a virtuoso, right? And then for whatever reason, if you're like me, you give it up when you're young and you never look back because you hated all the practice sessions. And then there's a couple things that you can sort of do by rote automatically, but you've kind of lost the skills. Why? Because your brain, the connections that it made to be able to do that, now that you've stopped doing that, now that you've gone off and learned how to program computers or whatever else you've focused your energies on, now those connections they're plastic. They have plasticity. They disconnect and they reconnect to help you do that other thing. Now, because of this, it doesn't matter what age you are. If you're in your 20s, if you're in your 40s, if you're in your 60s, if you're in your 80s, or anywhere in between, literally, it doesn't matter what age you are. This is the way the human brain works. So if you don't have a skill today, you simply need to do that thing and your brain will reorganize around the thing that you're trying to do. Your brain will your brain has the plasticity to help you achieve whatever it is that you're setting out to achieve. But it focuses on what you do, which is why this whole thing is about take action every single day. Because you need to take action every day to develop those neural connections, to strengthen those neural connections. If you go step by step through a systematic process like what I built, you're going to be enhancing those neural connections with every single step so that you become a creativity machine. You become an originality machine, because I haven't built it based upon some rigid formulaic story structure. I've built it on the process, on the mindset, on the brain approach, the holistic creative approach to the creative process itself. Because that's what writers need to have. Those are the skills writers need to develop to actually survive in a professional creative environment. That's the key to success. So it's not just about how do we take your idea and turn it into a story. Writers fixate on this idea of, I want to make my story great. I want to sell my story. I want to see this movie that I have, this idea that I have for a movie as a movie. And yes, that is a powerful motivating driver. But in order to make that happen, it's not enough to take that idea and turn it into script form. And this is the thing that I really want to get through to you. It's not enough to do that. You have to change the screenwriter's brain. You have to change your mindset about the entire process, because you have to bring the power of the whole process to your process. You have to bring the power of all of it, your creative intuition, your experiential awareness, your understanding of what it is that you're creating. You have to bring all of that to your work, because that's where the magic happens. That's where you're going to have those scenes or those lines of dialogue or those character moments that just leap off the page. Because they leap off the page because they're not some scientific worker bee approach to the problem. They're intuitive. They come from your creative subconscious. They come to you rather than something you impose. When you impose, it's entirely left brain. It's analytical. It's that meticulous thing. And there's a place for that. One of the biggest problems writers have is they start one way or they start the other way, and they just do that. If you ever sat down and you had an idea to write and you just stream of consciousness start writing, and then you start rereading your work and you go, oh, I don't like the way I did that, and you go back and you fix that thing. What you're doing is you're jumping around to the wrong parts of the process. You're not using your brain, your mindset, your creativity in the most effective, efficient way. So my whole thing, my whole approach is about helping you understand how to use your brain, your tool, your voice, your vision, you in a creative way, and use that in a way that's going to actually be in sync with and usable by producers and production companies. Okay, so what's the quick takeaway that we can have at the end of this slightly overlong Mindset Monday video? The reality is this: your brain has the capacity to be transformed into whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do, that tool can help you achieve it. But to get there, you have to form the neural connections that lead to that. If you want to become a great pianist, you have to form those neural connections so that moving your hands along the keys becomes intuitive, second nature. It's not something you have to think about. Have you ever watched a concert pianist try to play the piano? They're not thinking about where their hands are going. They're feeling it, because it has to come from that intuitive, creative, subconscious place. If you watch a professional golfer, they don't sit there and think about their stance and their angle. Otherwise, the ball goes way off wherever, right? They just glide through it, and their focus is on the big picture. Their focus is on their intuition, right? Their focus is not on their intuition. They're intuitively letting this happen because the skills are there, because the neural pathways have been cemented into place through ongoing consistent practice. That's what you need to do as a writer as well. That's how we need to approach the process as well. Developing those skills is what sets all of this apart from everything else, right? It's not about the 5 tips to this or the 6 ways to achieve that or the analysis of these 10 films. It's not about those things. You're trying to create something unique and original, and the way you do that is you develop the skill of creating something unique and original, and you do that through consistent, ongoing daily action. That's what the system that I built was all about. That's what this series was trying to originally be about. At the end of the day, that's why you need to take daily action. Even if I'm not here every single day, you have to take daily action because that's the only way to create those neural pathways. Now, if you take consistent daily action, but you're taking bad actions, you're developing the hook in your swing, or you're getting the keys wrong on the keyboard or whatever, then you're going to take longer to get where you're trying to go because you're developing bad habits that are going to keep you from the end goal. But if you take consistent, ongoing daily action, you continue to develop the key skills and you build upon those skills as you go along, success becomes inevitable. It becomes something that you can achieve because your brain is fully formed and designed to help you achieve whatever goal you set for yourself. That's what your brain is designed to do and be. Embrace it, understand it, capture it, harness it, and apply it to your ambitions. That's today's Daily Prompt. We'll see you in the next episode.